Good morning, all you freedom-loving patriots out there. Craig Gibson here with Sons of Liberty, and this is Constitution Coffee and Service. All right, so this week we're going to be brewing up our Overwatch Coffee Shop Protectors of the Constitution blend. Now, this is a blend made up of beans from all around the world, which we thought was pretty fitting, given our different branches of the service that this one represents, and their deployments all over the world. It's a great blend, not too overly caffeinated, so it makes it good for a nice breakfast coffee or maybe a dessert coffee. So, like I said, we'll be brewing it up all week. Come on in, give it a try. Also, our 2-ounce sample bags have arrived. So we have samples for all 8 of our current Overwatch Coffee Shop coffees, and we will continue to do them as we release new ones. This will allow people to purchase the smaller bags, take it home, brew it up in their own brewing method, and figure out which ones they truly like before deciding to buy the full 1-pound bags. Alright, so this week we're actually going to cover 4 amendments because they all really go together. It all pertains to the criminal law side of things. So starting with the 5th Amendment, which is one you actually hear about quite a bit when people talk about pleading the Fifth and so on. So no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on the presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land and naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger. So, of course, if our military is deployed, any criminal charges presented, it doesn't fall under this, as well as if there was criminal charges being presented, say during time of a natural disaster or martial law, or any time, our National Guard might be deployed here on the streets of the U.S. Or shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life and limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Now, whatever the founding fathers' intent was with this, it's definitely one of those that's easily been misinterpreted, manipulated, and they have found different ways to get around this. For example, we talk about private property not being taken for public use without just compensation. Well, who determines that just compensation? Of course, it's the person purchasing it, the federal government or the state government or city government. And what we have seen happen many times in cases of this is they will present a dollar amount for a property that they want to obtain. And of course, it is usually well below market value. And because of that, a lot of times the people who they're trying to purchase it from will decline that offer. And then what we see happen is they step in with their eminent domain, condemn the property, and then the property owner still has to vacate it and give it up, and gets no compensation for it. So, this is just another way for them to get around the Constitution, get around law in order to get what they want. We saw this back in Aurora, Colorado when we were there a few years back, when the city decided they wanted to dress up the area around the former Fitzsimmons Army Medical Center and base there. So, there were some houses, some businesses and that they wanted that property because they wanted to put in these nice shopping centers and hotels and stuff, because at the old Army base, they were putting in new hospitals like University of Colorado, the Veterans Hospital, Children's Hospital. There was already the Veterans Nursing Home there. I mean, so they were wanting to do all this, so they wanted to dress it up, right? So if people refused to sell their property, they would just go in, claim eminent domain, condemn the property, and take it anyway. When we talk about people cannot be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process, we have really seen a lot where that just doesn't hold up anymore, because people have just allowed our rights to be stripped away or chiseled away at. One of the big ones is red flag laws. Now, a red flag law allows a judge to order a temporary confiscation of their weapons if someone presents the case that the person may be a danger to themselves or others. Now, doesn't have to be any hard evidence of this. All you have to do is, say that you have a feeling, this person, you've seen an alteration in their behavior, and this can really go heavily against our returning veterans, because all they have to do is show any sign of a mental disturbance, whether it's PTSD, traumatic brain injury. They may have absolutely zero intention of hurting themselves or others, but maybe they enjoy hunting or just going out and sports shooting. And somebody can basically go and say, hey, this person's a danger to themselves, they take the weapons away, and then good luck fighting that one to get them back. You would have to jump through so many hoops and hurdles, and it would cost you so much money to be able to do it. And this is just another way to get around it. And unfortunately, and I know there's a lot of people that watch this that are supporters of Trump and going to vote for Trump. And I'm not saying that we're not voting for Trump or a supporter of his, but let's face it, we have to call politicians out and hold them accountable for their words and for their actions, regardless of whether we voted for them or we like them or we support them. Because until we can be adult enough to actually call them out and hold them accountable, especially when they're of the party we voted for, then we're not doing any justice to the whole system. But when you see a video of the President Trump, sitting with Vice President Pence, Nancy Pelosi, Feinstein, I believe Schumer was there, and several others, and the words come out of his mouth that first we have to take the guns, then we worry about due process. When those words came out of his mouth, that was scary. Now, he's already proven himself to not be the champion of the Second Amendment that he claimed he would be when he campaigned. We've seen that with the bump stocks. We've seen that with his support for red flag laws. And I know he's kind of backtracked on that and changed his mind a little bit, but still. Rash decisions lead to unconstitutional laws. Okay? And if he'd had been in a position, had the ability at that point in time to actually implement this, it could have been bad for the entire country. It would have been bad. So, we've got to hold them accountable. We've got to be honest enough with ourselves to, admit when our candidate screws up. Dan Crenshaw's another one that, not that we could vote for him here in Tennessee, but had all kinds of respect for him. And then when he was touting the whole red flag law thing as well, that just, yeah, that changes your mind about people real quick. Okay, so Sixth Amendment. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right of a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed. And we have seen in many cases where especially defense attorneys have argued, well, they can't get a fair trial here, so we need to move the venue. And we've seen it moved. I mean, Oklahoma City, for example, Tim McVeigh and Terry Nichols, it was felt they couldn't get a fair trial in Oklahoma, which, I mean, quite frankly, could they really? So, of course, it was tried in Denver. But we've seen many times where it's been argued, and successfully, and sometimes it's not successful. But, so that's one of those things that's like, well, okay, it's, in the Constitution, it says that it has, should be in the state and district where the crime had been committed, but obviously there's some leeway with that one. Let's see. Which district shall have previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. So, again, we've seen especially in one past administration for sure, and yeah, that was the Obama administration, where American citizens could be arrested and never have charges brought against them simply based on the suspicion or a presumed affiliation with a terrorist organization. And we saw how a lot of the dialogue on what constituted a terrorist, whether domestic or otherwise, had altered and changed during that administration, and really made it much easier for them to just basically go in, pull an American citizen out of their home, out of their job, off the street, arrest them, and lock them away and never actually officially file charges. Yeah, even though this clearly violated the Sixth Amendment, we allowed it to happen. And I know there were a lot of people that spoke out against this and were trying to fight it, but when it feels like a majority of your country is just willing to give up their rights in the name of security, in the name of safety, even if it's a false security, it makes it hard. It makes it hard to fight. It makes it hard to stand up. It talks about an impartial jury. Okay, and you'll hear a lot of people say, well, it's a jury of your peers. But really, it's not. Because of the way they pick their juries, the whole jury process where prosecutors and defense attorneys can dismiss certain possible jurors based on questions. But if it was truly a jury of your peers, then every person who sits in that jury would be a person who is equal in abilities, equal to you in your abilities, your qualifications, your age, your background, your social status. And we know that doesn't happen. I mean, we hear all the time about how, well, if they'd had more of this ethnicity on the jury, this would have went different. Or if we'd have had more poor or more middle class people on the jury, this would have went different. Or in the case of wealthy people, well, if there had been more social elitist and wealthy, then this would have went differently. So really, it's not a jury of your peers. Not when you look at what a peer actually is. Seventh Amendment. In suits of common law where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of common law. So what we're talking about here is like civil suits, civil lawsuits. And what's funny is, so the Supreme Court has basically required that all states adhere to, at minimum, the Constitution of the United States. Now, we know that that doesn't happen. I mean, California, Illinois, New York are just, a few examples of states that totally disregard the United States Constitution. But in theory, they should be adhering to, at minimum, the U.S. Constitution, and their state constitutions should not be in direct conflict of the U.S. Constitution. But in this case, so the Supreme Court typically has said, okay, all the states have to protect basically every other constitutional right, with the exception of this one. Now, what I mean by that is only in federal court, under a civil lawsuit, are they required to have a trial by jury if the amount is over $20. State court, it is not required. So you could have just your general trial right in front of the judge and the court reporter, the bailiff, and that, and never have a jury hear the case if it's under $20, or even over in the case of states. So it's kind of interesting that this one, the Supreme Court didn't feel, I guess, was worthy of the same standard at the state or city or county levels as it is at the federal level. Amendment 8. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. So so what is excessive bail? It varies. It varies by person. It varies by situation. I mean, we've seen where stealing a pack of bubble gum can carry the same fines, the same jail time, the same criminal charge as stealing a car. Especially in some states, in some cities, where the way the codes are written. And of course, then you have your attorneys that, especially defense attorneys, that love to argue for criminals. Now, just because you've been arrested, just because you've been brought before a jury or, before a judge, doesn't necessarily mean that you're guilty. We've definitely seen lots of cases where people were charged with a crime that they didn't commit, and in the end it all worked out for them, of course, after they've spent just tons of money on attorneys and just kind of had their name run through the mud over it. But in general, the criminal justice system needs to be revamped to where it's actually a justice system. We've got prisons and jails that are nothing more than country clubs. When an inmate at a prison is treated better than an elderly or a disabled person or a sick person in a nursing home, that's not good. When taxpayer funds are paying for criminals to be educated, to be get college degrees, paying for their medical, their dental, their vision, for them to work out and exercise, for them to have cable TV. No. And the funny thing is, you actually have attorneys that would argue that not having a workout facility, that not having cable TV is cruel and unusual punishment. Even though, for the rest of us, that's pretty much, kind of a reward deal. You work hard to be able to afford to have cable, or to have streaming services, or to have a gym membership, whatever the case is. Things that the average citizen has to work their tail off for every single day to be able to obtain, the criminal should not be able to obtain so easily. And then when we talk about excessive bail, it amazes me how many times excessive bail will be argued when a person can clearly afford the bail that has been imposed, or in cases where excessive bail has been placed on, petty charges, petty crimes on people who couldn't afford it. And, maybe that theft was to feed their family, whatever the case may be. So we definitely need to revamp the entire justice system, because there are far too many criminals that are getting away with way too much because their system is too lenient on them. And then there are those who the system is far too aggressive on, and we end up turning out more criminals rather than actually helping the person overcome that challenge and becoming productive members of society. So those are amendments 5, 6, 7, and 8. Pretty, in a way, they're pretty simple, but at the same time, we look at our justice system, we look at how things have been manipulated, and then they're not so simple anymore. Guys, again, as always, we must stand up for our rights. The silent majority must be silent no more. Because when the minority, the loudmouths out there, are drowning out the voices of those with some common sense, with some actual education behind them, whether it's a college degree or sitting down, actually reading once in a while, learning our history, learning our Constitution, learning our our core values as America. The ones who are willing to stand up for the rights, for the Constitution, for this country, we must stop being silent. It's time. It's time we hold the politicians accountable. It's time we hold the criminals accountable. And we can only do that if we start speaking up, and we start standing up, and we stop being afraid. We have to stop fearing the criminals. And that's politicians on down. I don't care. If they're criminals, we need to stand up to them. All right, guys. This one, of course, service-wise, still goes out to our law enforcement, our EMS, our firefighters, our military, always our military, at every level, National Guard, Reserve, active duty, our veterans who have served their time, who have come home. If it wasn't for this core group, this group of sheepdogs who are out there willing to put their life on the line for others, those who have compassion for others until the act of aggression is needed to protect those lives, those are the ones who are keeping things in order, or trying to. Those are the ones who are still standing up for our Constitution. Now, I know there's some that would argue that, well, there's some bad cops out there. You know what? There's bad in every job. I'm tired of hearing about how there's bad cops. There's bad everybody. I mean, look at our politicians. You're worried about what the cops are doing? Worry more about what our politicians are doing. All right, guys. As always, faith, not fear, because fear will lie to you. It will sell itself to you as the most beautiful thing in the world, only to let you down in the end. And as always, be the kind of American that's worth fighting for, standing up for, and even paying the ultimate sacrifice for. All right, guys, we will be back with you next week with Amendment 9.